Councillor Chalmers.
I have a question. Can you guys hear a baby crying in the background on my microphone?
No, it's all in your head, Dan.
I can hear it, but it's pretty faint. I wouldn't have paid attention.
I have my my settings turned up pretty high to. I just want to make sure that there isn't too much noise.
Oh yeah, I can hear it a little bit.
Can you? Okay, what do I got? I've got 2 minutes. Okay, let's have a look. Maybe I can.
It's only now that you mentioned it that we can hear it.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about it. It's fine.
All right, great. Where are you, Mrdt?
Welcome.
Qualicum. And I'm in Comox. So it's kind of nice actually with Zoom. We get to be able to be pretty flexible. So take the good with the bad.
Yeah, I'm back and forth a lot, so I never know where I'm going to be. I get the cafe on Tuesday.
Oh, that's so exciting.
Ooh, awesome.
Now I'm thinking,
Is it served coffees Tuesday afternoon or what?
no, we're going to take a couple of days. Figure it out. Learn what a cappuccino is. Just kidding.
I'm gonna come by. It's gonna be awesome.
Duncan, any advice for restaurant owners?
Don't do it.
I thought I'd let you say it, Dunk. Anyways, good luck with all that, Brent.
I did have a life and then I owned a restaurant.
Oh, you're gonna do great. Coffee shops are great. It's gonna be awesome.
My advice is try to be closed 1 day a week. I wouldn't open another business open 7 days a week.
Okay, here we go. It is 4:30. I'm calling this meeting to order and acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation, Tla-o-qui-aht, and I am coming to you from the traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. Notice to attendees that the meeting is being video recorded and will be published on the District of Tofino's YouTube channel. Do we have, I move that we adopt the agenda. I do need a seconder because we have an amendment. Seconded by Councillor Thick. And so the comments are that we would, at the request of Manager Mr. Work, to move item 9.4 to 9.3 due to visiting member scheduling. Can we, so I'll move that amendment. Seconded by Councillor Chalmers, all in favor? So that amendment is passed, and all in favor of adopting the agenda as amended. Excellent, the agenda is adopted. And if there is no objection to adopting the consent agenda as listed in our agenda, I will go ahead and do that. Seeing no opposition, the consent agenda is adopted. And for those looking on with the agenda in front of them, you'll notice there's some recommendations, and that all gets adopted with the consent agenda as per Robert's Rules of Order. And the minutes are also adopted within the consent agenda. Do we have any public comment on the agenda items, Ms. Best?
Thank you, Mrdt. Currently, we do not have any members of the public signed up to enter in a public comment, but I will call once, and I'll call twice, and I will call thrice, and we still have none. Just a reminder to members of the public, we do have the Q&A function down at the bottom of the Zoom window. So if you do have information you'd like to share with or ask a question of council at the end of the meeting, you can also use that function at the end as well. Thank you.
Excellent. Moving on to Mayor's report. I was honored to be invited to attend the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, the first inaugural National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, the September 30th, hosted by the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation and put on by Nora Martin. It was a very powerful event and march, and there was many people attending. I believe close to 100 marched and possibly 200 hosted. And thank you to all the businesses and residents in town who donated time and energy and food. And thank you very much to district staff for putting in effort and time into making the first day, National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, quite a powerful success. We did, Councillor Chalmers and Councillor McMaster and I and staff met with our some fixed roof accommodation provider to discuss the Mrdt request, and that'll be covered later on in this agenda, I actually believe. And the MLA, sorry, CAO, Mr. McPherson and I met with our MLA to discuss UBCM ministerial meetings as a review. So that was excellent. That is all for my mayor's report. And now we're moving on. Delegations, I believe we have no delegations. And we'll be moving on to correspondence. I believe 8.1, Tofino Housing Corporation. Letter to Mayor and Council regarding full-time employment requirements for 700 Sharp Road, affordable housing and rental applicants. Yes, Councillor Steer.
Did you want me to read the recommendation or?
Yeah, you go ahead. If there's no comments on this, why don't you go ahead and read it? Let's do a little preamble. This is a request from the Tofino Housing Corporation to relax full-time employment requirements due to COVID over the last couple of years and how that may have disrupted some full-time work for residents trying to apply for this affordable housing project. Go ahead, Councillor Steer.
I'll recommend that the staff be directed to provide Tofino Housing Authority written confirmation that the proposed relaxation of the full-time employment requirements be implemented and approved as per the September 13th, 2021 THC board resolution as stated in the October 12th, 2021 correspondence to council titled Relaxation of Full-Time Work Requirement for Creekside 700 Sharp Road Rental Applicants.
Seconded by Councillor McMaster. Any comments on that? Yes, Councillor Thick.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with this in principle. It wasn't completely clear to me whether this was a 1 year only relaxation or does it, I know it's in relation to COVID, but it doesn't seem clear to me that is it in perpetuity? Will it be reviewed every year? Is it just for this year only? Those are my questions. Thank you.
Those are excellent questions, and I do not have an answer for that. Councillor McMaster.
I suspect it'll be for 1 year only. It's for the initial go round of applications for Creekside. And I fully expect with a number of people that we know are applying for accommodation there, that Creekside will be filled on the first round of applications. I doubt very much whether there'll be any vacancies within the first or second year. So I'd be surprised if this amendment continued beyond that, unless the plague continues forever.
Councillor Thick, go ahead.
Yeah, I think in the best interest of, we've got these, it's all new, we've got these new rules, and I would love to see that, somehow there was a part in that recommendation that it was for 2022 or to be reviewed annually. That's my thought, that's my recommendation on this. Otherwise, I would approve the recommendation.
I'm just go ahead, Councillor Anderson, and then Councillor McMaster.
If Councillor Thick would like to change the recommendation, I would say that she should move an amendment to put it to council vote.
Well, we've read the recommendation. We've had a seconder, so I believe that is the appropriate requirement here. Now, we don't like to make amendments on the fly, so we can either make a motion for an amendment, or we can make a motion to defeat the motion, return it back to staff to add that in. So maybe perhaps a comment from Ms. Best on this one.
Thank you, Mayor Law. You may amend a motion that's on the floor, and then once we either adopt the amendment, then you can go back to amending the original motion on the floor. So it's kind of layering. So right now we do have a motion on the floor. We are moving to amend that motion, and then we adopt that amendment. Then that does amend the original motion, which you then final vote on the first initial. I know that sounds complicated. However, in order that to happen, Councillor Anderson was correct. Councillor Thick, we would request that you move that amendment and then have a seconder in place. Then we can vote on the amendment and then go back to the original motion.
So in order to move that to Councillor Thick, I would suggest you make it fairly clear what the intention is to make this for 2020, like 1 year or something like that, just to be clear.
And through the mayor, one more moment, if I may, the letter provided by THC, we do have Ian Scott here in the meeting, so he could clarify if there's confusion, because he's due to speak at the next presentation on the agenda. However, this letter from THC is for the first call of applications. So the first call of applications to this housing unit is due on January 1st, 2022. So this relaxation would only be for the specific cohort of applications. So I'm not sure if this is necessary, but it's up to council to decide that.
Sure, that actually makes sense to me. I'm going to throw it over. Can I ask Councillor Steer before I acknowledge your hand there, if Councillor Thick would be happy with that explanation from Ms. Best, that this letter is for the first call only?
I understand that from reading the report. It's just not completely clear to me when I read the recommendation. I think it's arguable that in years perhaps to come, there could be people saying, well, you passed this recommendation, and does it not still stand? So the only thing I would seek to add might be at the end of the sentence where it says Sharp Road rental applicants, comma, to be reviewed annually. And that means we don't know when the pandemic is over or when this situation might unfold in a better way. I would just love to see a contingency there, that it doesn't run on forever, because we are trying with all that we've done in the last 10 years to support people who are working in Tofino locally. And I see that this closes that gap completely. So that would be my suggestion for an amendment, 3 words, to be reviewed annually. Thank you.
Okay, I'll let Councillor Steer speak on this one before we...
Yeah, I didn't want to belabor it, but it was clear to me within the letter that this was only for this initial intake period. So I didn't have concerns regarding it moving forward into the future, because it was clear to me that this was for this exact first application. And there was only one first-time application. So in my opinion, it would have been finished after this. So I don't want to muddle it even further, but I was fairly clear in my understanding that this was for the first intake, and we only have one intake, so it would be null and void after that.
Yeah, that would be my take, is that as per the September 13th, 2021 THC board resolution for the first intake. However, we can. I'm happy to have Councillor Thick make the motion for an amendment, and we can look for a seconder, and we can vote on it. Go ahead, Councillor Thick.
Okay, thank you. Then I would recommend to council that we amend the motion, the recommendation before council, that staff be directed to provide THC with written confirmation that proposed relaxation of the full-time employment requirement be implemented and approved as per the September 13th, 2021 THC board resolution as stated in the October 12th, 2021 correspondence to council entitled Relaxation of Full-Time Working Requirement for Creekside -700 Sharp Road Rental Applicants, to be reviewed annually.
Seconded by Councillor Chalmers. Do we have any further comments on this amendment? Yes, Councillor McMaster.
Just for clarification, who's going to review it, council or THC?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, this starts to get into muddy waters. I mean, we don't want to, I mean, we only want this relaxation for, as far as I understand, for the period affected by COVID. So it is a temporary, hopefully temporary purpose. Go ahead, Councillor McMaster.
I think you've also got to remember that there are 3 council members that sit on the THC board. So I think they'll all be aware of this conversation going forward.
Okay, any further comments on the amendment? Yes, Councillor Thick.
Yeah, well, who reviews it now? And back to Councillor McMaster, I'm not sure. So wouldn't is it the THC that reviews the criteria for this for Creekside? Wouldn't they be the same? Isn't that the same group that would? I'm just saying that there has to be an endpoint to this. And I read the report and I understand what the intention is. It's just it isn't sort of nailed down in the recommendation, to my way of thinking.
You know, Councillor Chalmers, and then I have a suggestion. Go ahead, Councillor Chalmers.
Yeah, I was going to make a suggestion because I do understand where Councillor Thick is coming from, and we found ourselves often in this council trying to understand what previous councils of 10 years were. What about if we defeat this amendment and amend it to for the initial applicant? So if they do want to come back next year, if the pandemic is, it could be a new request.
That's exactly what I would have suggested as well. Yes, Ms. Best?
Through the mayor, yes, if we can just add, defeat this motion, correct, Councillor Chalmers, and then instead of saying for the first application period, actually state for the January 1st, 2022 application period and assign that specific date to the resolution. And then I think it's very crystal clear for everyone, especially staff who will be writing this letter for you. Thank you.
Excellent. So I'm going to call the question on the amendment as presented, which Councillor Chalmers and I suggest be defeated. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, the amendment is defeated. And Councillor Chalmers, would you like to read the second amendment with Ms. Beth? Council.
The staff be directed to provide Tofino Housing Authority THC written confirmation that the proposed relaxation of the full-time employment requirement be implemented and approved as per the September 13, 2021 THC board resolution, as stated in the October 12, 2021 correspondence to council titled Relaxation of Full-Time Work Requirements for Creekside 700 Sharp Road Rental Applications for the January 21st application, 2021, January 1st, 2022 application. Thank you.
Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any further comments on this before we call the question? I'm calling the question. All in favor? So that motion for the amendment has passed. Now I believe, Ms. Best, we have a motion on the floor for the actual resolution or recommendation. So I'm going to call that question now for the amended motion. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. 8.2, we have Rebecca Hurwitz, Executive Director, Tla-o-qui-aht First Trust regarding the 2020 periodic review. Do we have any comments from council? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Thick.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to add, this is a huge, I don't know if people are aware, but this is a huge accomplishment and something that probably took 2 years of part-time work to reach this, to be not reinstated, but to be given this designation again. So I just want to say publicly congratulations to the whole team at the CBT and just to all the people in this region who believe in this and make this biosphere a really special place to be. So just congratulations is all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Very well done, CBT team. Excellent. Moving on, we have presentations and reports. We have an invited presentation from Ian Scott, our interim director of the Tofino Housing Corporation. I believe Mr. Scott is waiting patiently.
Thank you, Mrdt. I just turned on Ian Scott's panelist option, so we should see him appear shortly. Thank you, Mr. Scott. You have up to 10 minutes for your presentation and time for questions if council allows.
You're muted.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having me. Just a point of clarification. The agenda said up to 15 minutes. I'm just wondering whether that's the case or whether it's actually 10 minutes.
Through the Mayor, apologies, Mr. Scott, it is 15.
Thank you very much. I'm just sharing my screen here, and I'll just take a moment to hopefully pop up for everyone. Council and the public. Okay, I think this is live now. Somebody let me know if it's not. Thanks again for having me. Obviously, you've dealt with this first item already. Thank you very much for the discussion. I did want to highlight one quick item, which is just to remind council, but since this isn't a public forum, reminder of the housing agreement. So what we were talking about earlier was this one requirement related to qualified applicants. And there are 4 criteria. One, that you've lived in the region 2 out of the last 3 years. You've been working full-time for more than a year. So that's your current state of employment. And that does include self-employed people who are eligible. Or you work, or you are a senior, or you're receiving disability assistance. So any of those criteria, you would qualify. Yourself or your spouse do not own real estate. And then depending on the unit size, there is maximum income that you can earn as a household before you're eligible to rent one of the units. And it says here approximately because it was based on the 2019 figures. And those are grown to the time of application, and they come out roughly to this amount based on the difference between the 2019 and the 2021 or 2022 housing income limits for Nanaimo. But these are the rough numbers that are on the screen. The housing agreement does allow for the circumstance where there aren't enough of people who meet these 4 criteria who apply, that then there's second and third priority applicants, which was in the update report on your agenda. And our expectation with Catalyst is that all of the units will be occupied by this type of applicant. So if you're a new arrival to Tofino, or you don't have a job, or you're being recruited to move to Tofino, you will not likely be eligible or get on the list of people who are able to rent at Sharp Road for now and and for the foreseeable future. So just wanted to put that out there for everybody. And certainly that's one of the questions I've had from both employers but residents of Tofino, which is, who's able to qualify and can I get a place to live at Creekside at Sharp Road if I'm moving to Tofino for a job? And the answer for the foreseeable future is probably not. So in the update report to council, we've been doing this about every 6 months or so, 4 to 6 months. Just wanted to acknowledge and thank those council members and others from the community who came to Creekside on the 27th to celebrate the fact that we are here. We're building new housing in Tofino. It's been a long time coming. MP Gord Johns told a story of the fact that when he first started looking at these issues, he was talking to a former councillor who said at the time, I think in 1995, oh, we've been working on this for 20 years. And so we're now in 2021, almost 2022. We have units just about ready for occupancy. So it really has been a long time coming. I know there's frustration that it has taken us this long, but I think also a celebration that we are here and have more units coming at Headwaters and at both the north and south site. And so if you look at the timelines on your screen, you can see that we're talking about the first building applications due by January with move-in in April. We're expecting October 25th, the Peterson Road extension into DL 114 to start construction, with the building construction on Headwaters North in February or March, which puts then occupancy for that building in the spring of summer of 2023, depending on construction timelines, which would mean applications are due about 4 months prior. So roughly the beginning of 2023, about a year from now, applications for that property, and then about 6 months or so later for the second apartment building. And there'll be different intakes for the two different properties because of the different eligibility requirements at Headwaters versus at Creekside. So if you are out there interested in applying for Creekside, or councillors, if you have questions from folks in the community, if somebody hasn't yet received an application form, that's not surprising if they've already emailed into me or the Catalyst, because those application packages aren't out yet. But if you haven't already expressed your interest, then you should send an email to renting@catalystcomdev.org is the way to get on the list of people who are interested. Regardless of whether you email now or in 2 or 3 weeks, everyone has an equal chance of being selected randomly out of all the applications received by January the 1st. And there's more details in the update report that describe some of those items, but I'm not going to dwell on that here this afternoon. So just to clarify what we're talking about on DL 114, starting with the road construction, then Headwaters North. Headwaters South will starting construction in 2023, later in 2022 is our hope, although not confirmed. We're looking to sell one of the lots in 2022 to help raise money for THC's efforts to build the 2 PR, our duplexes, or the price restricted resident restricted duplexes. We're looking to initiate that design process now, with construction starting potentially in 2022, if not into 2023. So for occupancy of these duplexes in 2023, and those are ownership options. So somebody can buy those units versus the current Creekside or Headwaters, which will be rental only. The other thing highlighted in the update report is the fact that our Mrdt revenues from the online accommodation platform, and despite my efforts to find out from the ministry, I believe it's still only Airbnb. They don't publish a list of what providers are registered as online accommodation providers. But I learned something last week in regards to the fact that really it's only anyone booking through what I think right now is Airbnb, where if I go to Tofino and stay in a vacation rental and pay through Airbnb, that tax that I'm paying on the room, that the 3% tax, 2.8%, which comes to the community, that is the money that is going to the Tofino Housing Corporation. But if I book directly with the provider, either through, by connecting with them through VRBO or Stay Tofino or any other method I might have of connecting with a provider, that money actually goes into the general Mrdt. And so we unfortunately don't know how many of those vacation providers are collecting money and remitting it like they're supposed to by law and go into the general Mrdt versus how many are receiving their money through Airbnb, and then thus the money coming to THC. The first year was quite encouraging. So in 2019, pre-COVID, in our PC times, we received $274,000 in MRDT remittances. And we thought, oh, that bodes well for some growth into the future and our ability to deliver non-market affordable housing to the community. Of course, COVID hit. And so last year, 2020 fiscal year, was a combination of remittances at the end of 2019 and early 2020 before we hit COVID, and then post-COVID. And then this year, 2021, the first 3 quarters of the year, we're really not doing terribly well. That said, we get our Q3 remittance, which last year was over $100,000. That'll be coming in December. So there's still a chance that we might catch up a little bit to where we were last year, or certainly we'll catch up some. How much we catch up, I can't tell you right today. What is disappointing, at least when we look at the general trend, is it seems like maybe we're a bit behind the recovery that's been experienced in the hotel sector. So last year we were down about 30% compared to 2019, whereas the general MRDT was down only about 20%. And you can see at the end of the graph that their trend line in the last few quarters, the general MRDT is up, and we're pretty flat. And then the question that is difficult for us to answer is, so these are my apologies, are the sort of the year over year, and then the quarters. If you just look at by quarters, the general's down only 19% for the Q4 to Q2, so this fiscal, whereas we're down 73%. That said, what I'm looking for is this little spike that didn't happen for some strange reason in 2019, but our supposition is just it's how Airbnb was remitting their taxes in 2019. And once they adjusted to the program in 2020, we see that same kind of spike similar to the summer period for the general MRDT, and that we're hoping, is going to come towards the end of the year. One of the speculations that I've heard as I've asked some questions trying to understand why we're at this point is maybe there are more providers who are encouraging guests, or because of the number of BC travelers, they're remitting directly to the province rather than through Airbnb, because they're collecting money themselves at their operation. And maybe that's one of the reasons, we're a little bit off compared to the general MRDT. And if that trend continues, well, it's going to make it more difficult for us to deliver on our affordable housing goals. That said, when you look at when this program was implemented, the general MRDT did go up from 2018 to 2019, but it was on a trend of going up already. So how much of that related to these small providers remitting directly versus just general growth in the tourism sector? We just really don't know. And we don't know if it's changed at all since 2019. So maybe the speculation that I just mentioned, that more operators are remitting directly rather than through Airbnb, that may be totally false. And it doesn't look like we'll be able to get that information from the province without a lot of pushing, and even then we may fail. The other question we don't know is how many people out there who are operators are actually following their legal requirements. In my consultation with MRDT folks at the Ministry of Tourism suggested they do know there's some confusion about the program, and whether everyone is sort of on board yet and remitting, is another question. And that may be some additional work that we need to do in Tofino. And of course, we did make a request as THC to get a portion of the general MRDT. And if this trend does prove to be true, or the supposition proves to be true, I should say, around, this component of small operators, their remittances not going through Airbnb, but going directly to the province, and thus we don't see it at the THC. I guess it just puts that in a little bit of a different light. And our remittances are not large compared to the general MRDT that goes to Tourism Tofino. That said, I know there's been a lot of discussion about this issue and other uses of this money that you're looking to implement. I just did some quick math today. We had asked for 0.35% of the 2.8%, so that's roughly 12% of the remittances. If you bump that down to something more like 5% of the remittances, or about 1% of the 2.8%, that would, based on last year's revenues, mean about a $50,000 difference between what was coming to TAC versus Tourism Tofino. And I don't know in your current consultation whether there's any room for considering that idea. With that, I'm going to move on from that topic and focus on the affordable housing plan that we have submitted. And just a reminder, we presented this last year, our strategic plan, the vision which we clarified, which is a safe, secure, and affordable place to live is available to all people who call Tofino home. And our mission, which is to facilitate the development and operation of below market housing in Tofino. And we identified a 2030 target of 30 units of price restricted ownership housing and 150 rental units. And so we're at about, with the current flow of development, at about 80 rental units, 84 rental units, plus a few secondary suites in the ownership housing, and then 4 price restricted units. So in this next potential development cycle between 2022 and 2030, we'd be looking to focus a bit more towards that ownership segment while still developing additional rental housing. So in terms of the Mrdt Affordable Housing Plan 2021, we targeted $265,000 in revenue and budgeted for using that money. We're going to get less than that, and so I've had to shift things around a bit. In 2022, our focus is really shifting towards these duplexes on DL 114 in terms of the pre-development money, and then small amounts in some of our other project areas, and then new 2 project areas that I want to briefly touch on. One is the DL 114 master plan, and then the second is the looking to spend some money on both partnership development. So looking for other opportunities for land and collaboration with both developers, but also other organizations in Tofino and in the region, as well as trying to build our organization slowly into a robust organization that can continue to develop new housing and shift over time into a potential operator of housing as well, rather than simply working with the Catalyst Community Development Society or other partners. So on the master plan, Council passed a resolution when we were doing the rezoning for DL 114, indicating that staff be authorized to conduct a review to look at what portion of the remaining land should be set aside for protection and under what means. My understanding that really no specific work has been done on this topic. And we've had conversations, or I've had conversations and presentations with Council before, looking at the fact that when you look at what we've accomplished to date, a key element has been the fact that we've had free land to work with, both at Creekside at Sharp Road, as well as at DL 114. And then so these land values, yep.
So, sorry, I'm sorry to budge in here, but you've gone over the 15 minutes. So I would like to,
oh my goodness.
But I would like to ask Council for another 5 minutes. So I'm going to make a motion to extend the presentation by 5 minutes to listen to the rest. Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Do we have any comments on that? Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Okay, any opposed? Seeing none opposed, go ahead, Mr. Scott, you have another 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mayor Long. So I've emphasized before the fact that the land value means that we are able basically to stretch our resources further and deliver more units. And this is the key metric, using Creekside as a good illustration of $50,000 per unit to get this below market affordable housing, rental housing on stream versus $20,000 if we don't have to buy land. So when we're looking at DL 114, really go back to when I started at THC in 2018, this was the picture I was faced with: a local area plan that suggested, just under half of DL 114 be developed for housing, and zoning that had already zoned a portion of the site, mostly for single family duplex and kind of small apartments. We then came along and said that's not going to work really in terms of being able to deliver the priority of rental housing, and we rezoned with council support the lands to allow for 3 duplex lots, along with 2 mid-rise apartment buildings. We also plan for potential, just like the local area plan suggested, expansion into other areas of DL 114. We did some work with the engineering firm McElhaney out in Nanaimo. We looked at the topography and our initial ideas of where the roads would go were revised based on additional information as we went forward. There are a number of wetlands, some identified, some I think based on sort of poking around. I think if we got a biologist out there, would confirm an additional small sort of wet area headwaters of Tonquin Creek. We have a large wetland area that was identified in the original work, which likely requires a 30-meter setback. We have areas of steep topography. And when you overlay all those areas, you see the arrows are going towards places where, without additional work yet on the ground, we think they're potentially developable. And then there's a few other areas that are, I think, a little bit more speculative, the Cedar Road right-of-way, as well as a few smaller areas, and then down kind of on the other side of that tributary of Tonquin Creek. If you overlay that on the local area plan and the DL 114 and the zoning, you see it's not a large portion of the lot, roughly 25% of the lot. And if the remainder were retained and preserved, you see the majority of the lot is retained. So what we're talking about with our allocation of $40,000 is starting a master planning process that would be really a combined THC district process. So part of my hope is that there's also staff and budget allocated on the district side, if not in this year, then in 2023, and that looks at more detailed environmental work, topography, looking at where those potential development sites might be, what is the resulting trail network, what kind of options do we have from a kind of a lighter to more involved touch, and then involving a public consultation process. So THC and the community can be certain sort of where we're going in regards to DL 114. And obviously, I think if there's zero interest in this work going forward from the majority of council, we need to have those conversations sooner before we start to spend money on environmental work and work by landscape architects and others to come up with those options through a master planning process. And with that, thank you for the additional time. I'm happy to take any additional questions.
I'll wait for you to stop sharing. Thank you very much, Mr. Scott. Okay, I'm going to open it up for questions from council. Questions for Mr. Scott? Yes, Councillor Thick.
And maybe this is a question for staff rather than for Mr. Scott, but I understand there was a resolution 2019 that spoke to the use of DL 114. It was a year I wasn't on council and I was unable to find that resolution today, but that's one of my questions. What does that have to do with what is being proposed today? And secondly, at what point does the THC imagine that we will reach? I mean, it's an insatiable desire to live 2 blocks from the beach in the town of Tofino, and I can understand why there's so many people, but and I'm not trying to downplay what has been all the work that's been put in, but I also would love to see, before we go further with some of these, is to understand that resolution if there is one. And secondly, we're in the midst of a new housing survey, are we not? And when would the results of that be known, and how that might influence some of our decisions over the coming months? Thank you.
Thank you. I think, I believe, Mr. Scott, you had that motion at the beginning of your presentation on your screen. Did you not?
Correct. Yeah. So that was the resolution passed by council, and it indicated a request for staff to report back on conservation options, like wetlands, and then as well as sort of, I guess, the mechanics. What are the options for doing so? That said, currently the district owns those lands, and without a specific other use, they're not being, they're effectively conserved for the moment, I guess, would be one way to look at it. And then in terms of the second question, the housing needs assessment will be important, but based on my experience in other communities, it is a good piece of guidance work, but it's by no means definitive. And unfortunately, what I think is going to be more definitive are the number of applicants we receive for Creekside and Headwaters, and what kind of wait lists get generated for those two buildings. And if we wait until those buildings are occupied in 2024 before starting to look at whether it does make sense and where we would do an additional development at DL 114, we're going to be a few years, 2-3 years behind. And all the evidence suggests that, definitely more than the existing tranche of housing that THC is working on is going to be necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Other questions from council? Councillor Steer.
Yes, thank you. Through the mayor. Thank you, Mr. Scott, that helped identify, and Councillor Thick's questions were similar to my own. And just for my own clarity right now, at this point, you're looking for support for the master planning process, which would identify some of the options available at DL 114, and included, as you pointed out, several processes, which would include public consultation, of course. And and just for my own clarity, this only would be specific for DL 114 and not looking at options on other potential sites or potential other land options within the district. This is specific to DL 114, correct?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Because of the way this program works, the affordable housing plan that THC submits to the province, along with the plan from Tourism Tofino, council doesn't approve it necessarily. And so it is up to THC how to allocate the resources, but it doesn't make sense if there's general lack of support for, doing this work, because it really needs to be a shared endeavor. It is land owned by the district, and if the district has no intent of making those lands available to the Tofino Housing Corporation, it doesn't make sense to spend any money on it. And so it's more opening up the discussion to indicate we've put this in our kind of work plan and budget for next year. We wouldn't get going on that work until later in the year, and so there's time to have some of those conversations, maybe both informally but in formal means, as to how we might, work together, THC and the district. And yes, this is specific to DL 114. We did do a land scan of district land when THC was restarted in 2018. And that's how we came up with the Sharp Road site as a sort of a better first alternative, but there really weren't any other good options available. And I don't believe there's been anything else, acquired by the district since. And then all other options would really be purchase of land or some kind of Crown, grant program. But most of those lands, those public lands, are tied up, as I understand it, within treaty discussions, and so I'm not sure that that's an avenue that's open to us.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent discussion. I'd like council to get into what to do with DL 114. What is a timeline, Mr. Scott, for your submission, and what are you looking for from council in timeline, so we can have these discussions at a deeper level?
The plan, as I understand it, goes into the province towards the end of November, at the same time that the tourism, Tofino tactical plan goes in. I don't think any final decision has to be made. You can see from the last number of years in terms of our plan and what we spend money on, can be different. What I wanted to do was indicate that it's in our plan for next year, and that by the time we sort of get to it, spring into summer of next year, we need to have a shared understanding of a project scope that that works, so that we're not spending money for no reason.
Okay. And just going back, besides DL 114, Mr. Scott, for the MRDT, just to be clear, getting further data, for that issue on where that MRDT may be going and how much it is, etc. I guess you suggest it's going to be extremely difficult to get better data in the near future or at all. I think for me personally, going forward to discuss some of that stuff, I would really like to have better data and find out how to get that data if it's not available. So just want to ask you again, just to clarify that. And I'm just going back in my notes.
Yeah, I received a response from my inquiry today from the Ministry of Finance, who is one of the ministers of the program, and they indicated a breakdown of the MRDT remittances by 4+ providers and less than 4 providers. That information was not available. That said, they have that information. So whether the district, through some encouragement and discussions, could make that data actually available, is a whole other question. But at least, they were able to respond to some of the other questions I had. But that one, they said that data was not available. But it might be available if you asked in the right way or pushed hard enough. But I have no idea for sure.
All right. Do we have any further comments or questions for Mr. Scott? Councillor Steer?
Sorry, yeah, I did have a quick follow-up, and it was touched on briefly around a needs assessment, and I'd heard anecdotally, and I don't know if there's a definitive number, but just on Creekside alone, in terms of the application interest, it is quite large for those 14 units. And I don't know, Mr. Scott, if you have any idea of what that sort of initial interest looks like. I just know that regardless of what our housing needs assessment, we all know intuitively that there is a large need. We do have those 2 apartment complexes coming on board, but I was just curious if you had any inside information about what that sort of number might look like for this initial Creekside.
Yeah, and I have mentioned that number to a few people, which is probably how you heard it, Councillor Steer. We've received between Catalyst and myself, upwards of 80+ initial inquiries for people who are interested in getting an application and looking at submitting an application for Creekside. How many actual applications we receive, remains to be seen, as well as, one of the things that we have speculated on is once the 14 units at Creekside are rented, does that mean anything different in terms of the number of people still looking for housing for Headwaters North? And once those 35 units are rented, does that mean anything different for the number of people still looking for housing at Headwaters South? Because of course, you all know that there are a number of businesses who are really short-staffed in Tofino. And so with a little bit of a loosening potentially in some of those units opening up, that sort of knock on may be a very similar tight demand scenario. And so I think what happens with Creekside will be telling, but what happens with the next 2 buildings will be really important as well.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Excellent work, by the way, on the THC, and it was wonderful to see to be there with our MP and MLA and staff and councillors for a little ceremony at Creekside. And we'll look forward to we'll reach out to staff and look and follow up with that motion that mentioned at the beginning and that Councillor Thick mentioned, and we'll delve into this with council. The question DL 114 coming up. Any other further questions for Mr. Scott? Seeing none, thank you again for all your hard work. Excellent.
Thank you.
We have 9.2. We invited a presentation from Nancy Cameron, our Executive Director for Tourism Tofino. No, sorry, just a sec here. When did we move ahead? We moved.
Thank you, Mayor Law. You're correct. I'm just looking at some items around.
So 9.4 went to 9.3, not 9.2. So we'll carry on with Ms. Cameron.
Let me just move some people here. Give me one moment here. Mr. Scott, I will bump you back to attendee. And Ms. Cameron, you should be appearing as a panelist now. And just as a reminder, you have 15 minutes and we will time. And thank you, Mayor Law, for indicating the time on Mr. Scott's presentation. And looks good.
And hello, everyone. Is my screen visible? Great, thanks very much. Well, Your Worship and Council, thanks so much for the opportunity to present our tactical plan for 2022. Whoops, I'll pop my video on here. There we go. This plan has been developed using feedback that we received through a 5-year strategic plan business consultation process that we conducted this past winter and spring with 60 people. These people included tourism industry and non-industry residents. So the tactical plan consists of 3 sections. The first section is the 5-year strategic overview for the years 2022 to 2027. Section 2 is the 2022 project plan, which includes detailed information on our annual tactics and objectives, and Section 3, the 2022 budget. The full plan is included in your meeting package, but for the purpose of this meeting, I'll speak to Sections 1 and 3. As a result of our strategic planning process, our mission statement and vision have been updated. Our vision, or why we exist, is to deliver sustainable growth for our members that contributes economic and social benefits for our community. Our vision, or what we're striving to achieve, is that Tofino is deeply respected and sought out for the transformative experience of oneness. So oneness being that everything is connected, everything is one. Consistently mentioned throughout our consultation were 5 key themes. The first, that tourism is recognized and appreciated as core to the Tofino economy. However, concern exists about summer over-tourism and impact on community. Number 2, that increasing non-peak visitation to benefit businesses and improve long-term employment opportunities is of high interest. Number 3, that Tofino is envisioned as a place where visitors respect and appreciate the culture, nature, and peoples and seek to deepen their connection. Number 4, a desire exists to strengthen relationships and collaboration with First Nations. And lastly, that there is an opportunity for a redefinition of tourism success beyond growth. From the key themes, we developed 4 guiding principles that now underpin our plans and work. Number 1 is that we understand that all things and beings in Tofino are connected in oneness. Success in tourism goes beyond success in business. It also means success in life, success for communities, and success in the preservation of the natural environment. The second principle is that every interaction with visitors, businesses, and community is an opportunity to raise consciousness about conserving, protecting, and regenerating the environment in our local way of life. Number 3 is that we invite those who are curious about deepening connections with nature and culture and history of local peoples. And lastly, that the work we do must support the objectives of our members while aligning to the goals of the official community plan, tourism master plan, and other municipal plans that are informed through resident consultation. And this work is divided into 4 major categories as determined by Destination BC. And they are destination marketing, visitor services, destination and product experience management, and administration. So starting with the first category, destination marketing, where we inspire travel to Tofino for the West Coast experiences, the things that we see that are available to see and do. Those are the drivers, those activities. That means that people decide to come here because of the desire to relax and connect, to walk the beaches, to go kayaking, whale watching, bear watching, playing in the ocean, and so much more. Once they decide to travel here, they select their accommodation, like we all do when we're traveling. Our goal, our first destination marketing goal, is to increase non-peak visitation to sustainably grow tourism to benefit businesses and improve long-term employment opportunities. Our objective is to achieve a 69% average occupancy increase for the months of October through May by 2027. So this is an increase of 10% over 2019. To achieve this, we will continue to inspire new and return fall, winter, and spring visitors, develop the small meetings and retreats sector, which is particularly important for creating midweek stays, elevate environmental and cultural understanding, collaborate with First Nations to increase awareness of their territories and experiences, promote air, shuttle, and bicycle transportation options for travel to and within Tofino, and work with our industry partners, such as Destination BC and Destination Canada, to expand reach and increase exposure in Eastern Canada and international markets. The next major category is visitor services, and we have two goals. The first is to increase visitor spending, longer stays, and repeat visits. Our objective is to have 70,000 visitor interactions annually by 2027. This is a 20% increase over 2019 numbers. And these interactions provide us with an opportunity to influence visitors to see and do more, spend more at our businesses than they had originally planned. Each interaction also provides our visitor services team with a chance to encourage a deeper connection with the destination. For instance, join a beach clean, explore the culture and heritage, and engage with nature through wildlife viewings and guided activities. And additionally, we can educate peak season travelers about the benefits of non-peak travel and encourage them to return in the fall, winter, or spring. Strategies include having a highly skilled and knowledgeable visitor services team, enhancing the exposure for non-peak experiences within our visitor center, and increase visitor touch points. The second goal is to continue to build a sense of place in the visitor center. Our objectives are to improve the visibility of cultural heritage and achieve a 20% increase in retail revenue over 2021 levels. And we'll do this by increasing destination and First Nations education and interpretation within the visitor center and featuring more locally produced products in the retail mix. The next category is destination and product experience management. Year over year since 2018, we have increased our scope of work, and substantially so in this plan. Our ability to fully deliver on the 4 goals in this section is contingent on our operating budget and scaled accordingly. The first goal is to foster experience development that connects visitors to our nature, culture, values, and peoples. Our objective is to facilitate the creation of enhanced and new experiences. Strategies are to add experience development expertise to our team, continue to support Indigenous experience development, and to develop and implement a plan to reinvigorate non-peak festivals and events. Goal 2 is to reduce the impact of tourism on the natural environment and peoples. The objective is to achieve an annual increase in visitor participation in environmental protection and regeneration activities offered by local organizations and ourselves, such as this year's Washed Up Wednesdays Chesterman Beach cleans that we coordinated. And we'd certainly like to see Tofino obtain a sustainable destination certification in the next few years. To do this, we'll continue to develop education approaches that encourage responsible travel and expected behavior. Many of our current messaging tools will be updated and enhanced. We will collaborate with local organizations to expand visitor participation in their conservation programs and education programs, and work together with the district members and community to achieve a sustainable destination certification. The third goal is to coordinate tourism development and management with local governments and members. The first objective is to improve seasonal staff levels. A shortfall in seasonal staff has been an identified trend for a few years, provincially and nationally, but it certainly was amplified in 2021 and has become a serious situation and a barrier for business optimization and high visitor satisfaction. The second objective is to renew the tourism master plan. The current plan was a 10-year plan spanning June 2014 to May 2024. So it soon needs an update. Master plans usually take a year or more to develop and are particularly useful as they create a common vision for tourism with residents, the business community, and governments. Strategies include coordinating a seasonal staff recruitment campaign in partnership with member businesses and collaborate with training partners to build local expertise, and partnering with you and area First Nations on the development of a new tourism master plan and other tourism-related initiatives. And the last goal in this category is to improve connections with industry, community, First Nations, and tourism partners. The objective is to increase our coordination and communication. And so we'll create opportunities for members to connect, share, and learn from each other, seek opportunities to collaborate, build support for tourism within the community, conduct effective and relevant member communication, support the chamber and industry associations with advocacy, and participate actively with our regional, provincial, and national tourism organizations. Now to the last major category of administration. Our goal, as always, is to operate with transparency, accountability, and in alignment with the objectives of our members and community. Objectives include clean annual audits, that 75% of our members are satisfied with the Mrdt investments that we make. 80% of members rate Tourism Tofino as a valuable organization, and continuing to be ocean friendly certified. Our strategies include that our records, plans, and other documentation is available to members, community, and governments, and this information is currently available on our website. Our activities will support the goals stated in the OCP, Tourism Master Plan, and other plans, that we have an engaged board of directors, report to members annually at the AGM, utilize research and data for decision-making, implement financial and environmental sustainability measures throughout our own operations, and continue to conduct our annual member survey. So budgeting during this pandemic has been and continues to be tricky. We're projecting that as long as international travel begins to return, 2022 travel patterns will be similar to 2019, as will the 2022 budget. You have a detailed budget in your package, but I've summarized it in a few graphs. This one shows our 2022 operating revenue streams. So 89% will come from Mrdt, 8% from retail sales, co-op advertising, and other, and 3% will come from other federal and provincial grants for a total of $1,351,250. Operational expenses are divided into those same four main buckets: destination marketing at 45%, visitor services at 27%, administration 15%, and destination and product experience management at 13%. Now, this chart compares the allocation of all Mrdt collected in Tofino, which is estimated to be just over $2 million in 2022, and has been pulled from the budget that's included in the tactical plan, the detailed budget. The blue column is 2022, is the 2022 budget, and the red column is the 2021 budget. So from reading from left to right, you'll see that 10% is planned to be used by the District of Tofino through the Tofino Housing Corporation for affordable housing initiatives. 24% to pay for the construction of the new visitor center, and the center will be completely paid for in 2022. 10% for Tourism Tofino administration and overhead. 30% will be invested in destination marketing. 18% will be used to operate our visitor center, and 8% will be invested in destination and product experience management activities, for a total of $2,035,727. And that concludes my 2022 tactical plan presentation. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. I'll wait for you to stop sharing your screen so I can see everybody. Perfect. Thank you very much. I was really encouraged with this presentation and reading the report. So, Ms. Cameron, I thank you very much. I found the guiding principles very responsive to the community feedback and to business feedback. So I just want to thank you very much for that before we start off. And with that, I'll open it up to council for questions for Ms. Cameron. Ms. Cameron. Councillor Steer.
I don't know if everybody just waits to go first or not, but I want to thank you, Nancy, for your work once again, and especially over the last year and a half. I'm sure you weren't expecting a pandemic in your job description and having to deal with that. And I have to say, Tourism Tofino, their ability to react, pivot, and adjust has really been remarkable. And that's obviously your leadership was critical in that role. So I do really want to thank you for that. And I also wanted to commend you on as Mayor Law pointed out, many of the goals and that you outlined in the strategic, you're already doing, and I've seen evidence of it, and it is really very solid. And I think you're, as Mayor Law pointed out, really taken that feedback and have applied it very directly. In one of the areas, the goal areas in the visitor experience, was stated the reduction impact of tourism on the natural environment and peoples. And I had a question, and it might be a little sidetracked, but in there, global climate change, as I'm sure you know, is a critical issue facing every layer of government. And one of the questions I had was, are there currently any strategies or initiatives that the local tourism industry is implementing? And if not, if it is something that's on the board of Tourism Tofino's agenda, and then side to that was, is there any criteria within this sustainable tourism certification that might apply in this area? I know that was a lot, and I should have just maybe broke it down a bit, but thank you.
No, thank you, Councillor. I hope that there are some metrics within the sustainable destination certifications. Those certifications are evolving, and so there are several deliverers of those. We do really want to align with the CBT and make sure that those organizations are together going through some kind of certification like this. So we do hope that as this area evolves and the attention to climate change just amplifies that there are metrics. I don't know right now if there are, but that certainly would be an intention. And we would look to some of that knowledge, education that those certification bodies can provide to help us as a DMO promote ways that our visitors can participate in climate change and reduction of the issues around climate change. I know certainly to the other part of your question, many of our businesses are very active in carbon neutral, in water savings. So they're on the ball with a lot of their activities, but having some kind, again, formal metrics that we can all put our hat on and support, I think is going to be very important.
Excellent. Any other questions before I'm going to go around to Councillor Scheib? Or Councillor Thick, a question for Ms. Cameron.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy, for a very thorough report. And I especially want to say that I take to heart and applaud your the strategic plan in regards to the non-peak visitation to encourage long-term year-round employment. And I think that's something I've certainly been speaking about for about 10 years. And it's really nice to see that it's a point in the plan. And I think that's great because we really do suffer quite a bit from the peaks and valleys in our town, not just in terms of the economics, but just how we struggle socially too in the winter. And I think, it goes right down to the water and the sewer and everything else. So one point I did want to bring out was just this, and I think Councillor Steer alluded to in the plan, you under destination and visitor experience, where 13% of the budget was allocated, and I believe it's going to be at 8% in 2022, which is a reduction to that section. So I just wrote it down as you were writing. but in any case, it is something that you're working on. But in particular, I bring out this point that there, and it's number 11 under destination and visitor experience. And I quote, build support for tourism with the community. And the action item was to improve local understanding of Mrdt and RMI in collaboration with the DOT. And it went on to say something about a reduction in misinformation. And the reason I bring this up is because, as you know, in the election that took place in March this year, I spent quite a lot of time talking to people. In fact, I made over 100 personal phone calls. And when I asked the question, what do you think is the main issue in Tofino today? Unsolicited, it came about that there was a question about tourism. And in particular, the three things, and I had to go back to my notes to look this up again, but the three concerns were lack of funds for infrastructure, a sense of being overrun, and a lack of input into tourism management. So I'm just stating the facts of what people told me when I was making those personal phone calls. And so I just wanted to say that in relation to what you've written in the plan in terms of building support for tourism within the community, I don't think it's necessarily that we need to help people understand the Mrdt and RMI, although that's important. What I do think is important is that somehow within this community that we need to really build the quality of life, and we need to build quality of life amenities for people. And I think that this is something that perhaps has been overlooked in Tourism Tofino's strategic plans in the last 4 years. I'm not saying that I have a particular thing that needs to be put forward, but I do just mention that people, from my perspective, were feeling that they needed to have an input into the common person, not just the overseers of the larger hotels. So I just wanted to say that not only do we need to reduce misinformation or include more information on some of those items you mentioned, but we also need to be really thinking about how we can be more inclusive with ordinary people, and how do we build amenities with the tourism industry in this town that will add to the quality of life of our residents. So that's, I guess, maybe it's a question, but it's a comment that, from my own experience this year, that I think we really need to put some strong emphasis on. Thank you.
Yeah, we're just going to keep it a little over 2 minutes there. Just Ms. Cameron, go ahead.
Sure. Okay, a couple of things, Councillor Thick. Just in terms of the destination and product experience management piece of our investment, it's actually doubled this year. It was 4% of our total operating last year. It's now 8%. That's of the total MRDT. When you look at our operating budget last year, it was 7% and it's 13% now. So we've gone the other way. We've increased it substantially over last year. And we had increased last year over the year prior to that. So every year upon year, we're trying to build that. Of course, that we have to keep readjusting our budget to accommodate that and find efficiencies. Regarding the input, totally agree. And that's why we did do a pretty robust engagement process here last January and February that informed this strategic plan. We promoted it in the newspapers and on the radio and electronically. The district pushed out that messaging for us, inviting anybody and everybody to participate. We did have 60 people, and it was about 2/3 industry and 1/3 kind of non-industry residents, non-industry involved residents. So we were pleased with that as a starting point, but totally agree. And we think that things like the tourism master planning process is one of those great engagement tools. And the benefit of it is that it is so robust and it does engage the whole community. And the end result is that common vision that we're all working with, that for tourism as an economic engine for our community, but community first. So I do look at that process as being critical, and look forward to it occurring here starting hopefully in 2023, maybe the end of 2022, 2023, so that that whole year-long process can take place, and rolling out a plan for 2024, mid-2024, to take over from the next one. And then regarding information, again, I think all of those tactics or activities help clear up some of the misinformation that might be out there about MRDT, RMI. I know there's lots, what it's used for, what it isn't. And we do hope here over the next few months to work with the district and the communications department there to have some kind of common messaging that can help with that.
Excellent, and I do think certainly the tourism master plan process is something that the DOT is very interested in working on coming up, and I'm glad to see that Tourism Tofino is looking forward to being a part of that. So that's fantastic. Any further comments from questions for Nancy? Councillor Anderson.
Thanks, Nancy, for your presentation. I'm really glad to see the shift in the strategic planning and towards sustainability, towards more of a connection with the environment and the community. I'm also very happy to see that there's a renewed emphasis on working with First Nations. I'd like to hear if there's any particular strategies around that, or if I'm not sure if you have a First Nations seat at the tourism board or Tofino Tourism Board table, or not. So I'd just like to hear about that. And also I'd be interested to hear in any sort of work that Tourism Tofino is doing with the arts community, arts and culture. Those are my questions.
Great, thank you very much. First Nations participation or involvement right now, to answer that question first, this year, we did have a partnership with TFN, with the Guardian program, and provided them with $15,000 to help support the Big Tree Trail, and with the goal that by next year it will be used to help train Guardians to do the interpretation tour on the trail, which would be just a really deep and involved experience for visitors. So this year, that money was used to help with the trail maintenance and pay some of the Guardians, and with the idea that next year we hope to be up and running with some guides on the trail that are taking the groups through the trail themselves. So really, again, building that deeper connection. We don't as yet have a First Nation seat on the board, but we are working on our connections with them, and it is a point of discussion for the board to take on. The arts community, we have helped fund the arts app and guide that's in development, but certainly arts and culture is really important to our messaging. It again gives that sense of place, and Tofino's filled with fabulous artisans, and it has a great deep culture and intriguing history. So we really are trying to bring that out in a lot of our advertising to inspire people to dig a little deeper. In the visitor center, we have lots of work to do in that area, but that's certainly, we have made good strides in making sure that we're elevating the arts and culture piece of the community, because there's lots of interest in it. Did I answer your questions?
Yes, thank you. It's great how artists are showcased at the info center too. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cameron. Now we've got Councillor Chalmers and Councillor McMaster. I know you haven't said anything yet, but do you have anything before we move on? We do have 2 more presentations. Councillor McMaster.
I'll just echo Councillor Steer's comments, but I actually wasn't too surprised how well Tourism Tofino's done, because ever since Nancy's arrived, she's met every challenge that's been presented. So I think this was just a bigger challenge, which she surpassed. So I'll just say a job well done.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Excellent, excellent work over the COVID pandemic, Nancy. Very good.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your work. With that, we'll say thank you and adieu, and we'll move on. We look forward to working with you more and more. Now we have a rearrangement in our agenda. We have 9.3 is our wastewater treatment plant project update. Sorry, Mr. Work.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Fraser Work. I'm the Director of Infrastructure and Public Works for the District of Tofino, and I'm happy to present an update on the wastewater treatment plant program for Council's review and consideration this evening. Supporting the presentation, we have a series of consultants that are joining us on today's call that'll be available for discussion and questions when in the deeper technical arena that we may land on in our discussion after my slide deck. And I'll just introduce those now, as you might be able to see them, or they might just appear magically with Ms. Best's sort of Zoom panelist introductions. But we have 3 members from WSP, which is the owner's engineer. We have the Director of Water and Wastewater, which is Trevor Dykstra. We have senior project managers and technical team, Lilith Lianage and Mrdt Harar, which are working very closely with us on a daily basis on the project. And from North American Constructors, which is our contractor group here supporting the project, we have Mr. Ronadine, who's Senior Project Manager, and Mr. Sean Eboy, who's also a Senior Project Manager, who is sort of spearheading on a lot of the estimating and the planning work. So the 6th and final person joining us today and supporting the presentation is independent civil engineering consultant, Mr. Jonathan Huggett. So I'm pleased to have all of these members here today supporting the discussion, and throughout Council's questions, I'll take a first swing at answering anything, or at least handing it off to the expert I think is going to add the significant portion of content to meet Council's needs in that area. So without further ado, I'll start sharing my screen, and we'll step through about 10 slides, and then I'll unshare to support the discussion and the dialogue that'll happen after. So this, the purpose of tonight's briefing is really threefold. It's to highlight where we're at in the process of redesign and reconsideration of a new way forward for the wastewater treatment plant. I'll talk a bit about the background and how we got here in a second. Identify the preferred and more affordable treatment technology and associated system cost savings in order to get that meaningful reduction in overall cost, which is really the objective here, and to discuss the next steps that will get us to construction. So by way of background, and all this information is expanded in more detail in the report that's before Council, and as Council knows, the 2020 request for tender submissions was met by a market response which was exceeding the $80 million mark for the project. And essentially the market said very clearly that we can't afford to build that design in that way. So we regrouped with both administrative, engineering, and legal considerations and review to come up with a new procurement way forward, which ended up in a negotiated RFP to the previous 2 bidders and awarded to NAC to help us find a suitable treatment technology alternative, and also identify project savings that would do best to get the project back within budget or as close to as possible. Council approved those changes in June, and we embarked upon this pre-design work, which is being presented here before any real design work is started as a milestone report for Council. The staff and the integrated project team embarked upon a series of detailed planning analysis and group team meetings to really look at how to realize that significant cost savings. We followed a stepwise process, which I've identified in the next few slides, which is highlighted in the report. The first of which was to revisit the requirements to ensure that we more robustly and accurately captured the technical requirements that the system overall must meet. And we added several new elements based on the outcomes of the 2020 process, which included a harder look at the constructability requirements that really drove the cost up to that unaffordable mark in the 2020 tendering process. And we realized that we had to take a harder look at some of these areas, which are highlighted in para B here, which was to find ways to reduce the on-site human resources required to build this very significant civil engineering project here at the remote West Coast location, to reduce construction time overall, to drill down and to find savings in concrete, which was a major cost driver, to reduce the excavation works in total, to maximize, in order to do some of those things, maximize off-site modular and prefabricated construction, and to reduce our overall size of what we do build to make sure that it's as affordable as possible. The requirements at para A that we looked at in more detail than previously was an effort to reduce significantly that capital cost, which was a primary objective, of course, but also to never lose sight of the operational costs and to drive those down wherever possible to meet our environmental and social requirements and our operational and supportability requirements to run and own this plant moving forward. The second step was a relook across the technology space at a bunch of different offerings in the wastewater treatment arena, which are listed before council on this slide and in the report. What it is a revisit and a look to find out if technologies had advanced in the ensuing 3 or 4 years since they were last looked at, if there was new configurations or offerings within the marketplace that would be attractive to Tofino and to meet our needs, as well as to make sure that we didn't miss anything when assessing some of these technologies, again, against those new constructability requirements or criteria. After that, we were able to down select to 4 different technology types, which was membrane bioreactor, integrated fixed film, activated sludge, sequencing batch reactor, and activated sludge. And it's important to note for council that there are many, many technologies that can meet our needs. But in some cases, the mix of the advantages and disadvantages when it comes to overall affordability, operating costs, and construction costs, it does privilege a few technologies to rise to the top of the preferred list, which was the 2 listed at the last bullet, which was the IFAS, and I'll describe that in a bit, and the MBR technologies. We did look again at the oxidation ditch, and we did assess in more detail if there was any refinements to the oxidation ditch, which was the 2019 design, that could be affected to get costs within the required range nearer to that 55 million budget mark. And the answer was no. It's been important for us, though, to compare any new technology consideration against the previous price to understand what magnitude of savings is possible with the technology change that meets some of those requirements that I listed above in the previous slide. When we had the 2 technologies, MBR and IFAS, we went through a more detailed cost comparison of both operating and capital costs, and some of the challenges that might be characteristic of those in the Tofino application. And then we went again around the whole system, which included the conveyance sites, the pump stations, and the different scope of work elements that were part of the 2019 and 2020 process to find where other meaningful cost savings may be lurking, with the key consideration that if we did change technology, do new opportunities for savings exist, or do new risks require us to actually mitigate those in a different way than the previous technology? What we found was that we were still looking at an approximate of $20 million or over in overall capital construction cost savings because of the smaller footprint and the offsite prefabrication and the integrated nature of the buildings that were associated with the MBR and the IFAS designs, which was a key element of our objectives. And also to make sure that the operating costs didn't place a new premium on an owner like the District of Tofino to own this site through life, or own this technology through life. and I'll talk about the results of those in a second. When we went through the conveyancing and the different other system components, we reviewed that if the site had to be reconsidered for any reason, and it did not, the site is still fit for purpose and provides us with the location and the performance that we would hope. And we did look at, because the smaller footprint of the new technology, should we look at another site as a possibility of saving money and reducing other conveyance and other system components? And we found out that the current site, as identified in the liquid waste management plan, was still the most attractive and the purposeful site for building the plant. And then we looked around for other savings, which are annotated in the report. In conclusion, the technology that we deemed most suitable to meet the needs of Tofino was the integrated fixed film activated sludge technology. And I would suggest also that, again, that both the MBR technology, IFAS, and other technologies as well are all possible and capable of meeting the needs of Tofino's wastewater treatment needs, but they don't do it with the same level of cost savings and the same level of operating advantages that we see from these two systems. And IFAS edges out MBR as a little bit less expensive over operating and build construction costs. It is more compact. It handles our variable and characteristic seasonal flows and loads for the wastewater. It's relatively simple and affordable to manage and own. It has lower comparable risks of failure and downtimes due to the simplicity of some of the systems and the equipment. And it optimizes many of those criteria for construction of offsite prefabrication and modularity that we would hope to gain with our preferred solution. So where we find ourselves here is where we've identified what we would consider the most suitable technology for Tofino, for both a total cost of ownership perspective as well as performance and complexity. We are ready to start the detailed design process, which will further refine overall system costs and further us to preparedness for planning and implementation of the construction phase. And very importantly, get us ready to submit our revised plans to the provincial and federal funders for approval. There's a space between the second and third bullets there just to highlight that we have to finish our estimates to present to council in the next coming weeks that highlight the amount of monies it's going to take for us to complete the detailed design process, which draws mainly on WSP's engineering supports, but notably also on legal and procurement costs and associated support costs for the planning that's required, and relies also on NAC's continued integrated project team and contractor inputs for planning and design to help WSP and the District of Tofino develop the best solution when it comes to more detailed, refined designs and planning. We would, wherever possible, apply any existing design that either NAC or WSP has developed in the past that we can shoehorn into our system. We are advantaged by the fact that the conveyance system that has been designed in 2019 remains largely intact with a few enhancements and refinements only, and not a wholesale redesign, which keeps costs down. And we would also seek to use any other, like I said, existing systems that we could apply to our designs with and specify those for Tofino rather than starting from scratch. We have the advantage with working in this integrated project delivery where we can access the network of vendors that work very closely alongside NAC, which is an advantage that this integrated process provides different from our previous procurement model. And once we're able to submit the right paperwork and refine designs with cost estimates to the funders, we would then proceed to, with their approval, to execute CCDC 5B contract, which is a stipulated sum contract for construction, which also comes with a discussion about how we want to project manage and support that project of construction from both the district as well as third-party consultants and engineering support. This whole process still puts us on track for an early 2022 construction start if a few things fall into place between now and then, which is, of course, the completion of the detailed design phase and the approvals of the required funding mechanisms to move forward, which are very major in their project planning importance and need some very important things to fall into place between now and Christmas. So we're working closely with the province to make sure how we best meet their timelines and their needs so that we get the information in the hands of the funders so we can move forward. But of course, most importantly, that council will be provided several project updates between now and then that are key decision points for us when it comes to identifying the cost of things, identifying the funding sources of things, and identifying the progress and the different decision points that come from some of these other agencies like the provincial and federal governments. My last slide is just a high-level schematic of what the integrated fixed film activated sludge provides and how it's different maybe than an oxidation ditch or an activated sludge system. And I'm not a wastewater engineer, so there's some on the call that'll be able to describe this, of course, in more interesting and accurate levels of detail. But it introduces a plastic carrier pucks that can be entrained in the effluent slurry that allows the biological process to both be accelerated and concentrated so that we can actually process more sewage without introducing a lot of complexity in the system. I expect council will have some questions about this technology and our track record and how we've gained confidence in the system over time. And there's examples working with the different vendors that NAC has access to, where there's dozens of these systems in operation in North America, of which just this single vendor has been delivering. And of course, there will be many more when you look at the different service providers in the commercial marketplace. This is just a high-level overview of how it works. And overall, once we integrate the buildings that are required to support this technology operation, our overall site footprint can come down in size to approximately a half or a third of the original oxidation ditch footprint, and introduce the capability of manufacturing many of these components and the mechanical components that support what's on the screen here to the point where they can be assembled and loaded on trucks and different logistics trains to get here remotely, rather than having to house all of the different workers that would have to build it in place if we were doing in situ concrete forming and that kind of thing, which was inherent in the design of the oxidation ditch system. So not a lot of detail there, but just a bit of a sort of pictorial reference to the technology of which we're speaking today. I'll stop sharing now and I'll switch over to the panel view so that council can ask questions. And like I said at the beginning, I'll do my best to provide an initial question and then I'll hand off to the professional that might be able to add the most value. Thanks very much.
Excellent. Mr. Work, I just want to start off before we go to council for questions. I want to comment on the tremendous amount of work, excellent work that you and Mr. McPherson and all the folks from WSP and NAC have done. It's been remarkable, and I thank you for it. With that, I would like to open it up to council, and I see Mr. McMaster Councillor McMaster has his hand up already.
Good job, Fraser. I have a concern, and I may have some questions later, but my concern is for the 2019 technology. There was a lot of public involvement. There was a committee with 3 councillors. I think it was Councillors Blanchette, Mayor Osborne, and Councillor Mrdt, and various members of the public. I actually went to a few of the site visits, and they basically decided on that technology that was for 2019 on the basis it was, for want of a better word, low tech, proven, tried, etc. So what we've been doing now, I don't really see as a redesign. I see more as a change in technology. So what I'm really concerned about is how we're going to get the public on side as fast as possible for this, because it's great barreling along like we are doing, but I think you need to get this out to the public. Otherwise, we're just seeing as if we've ignored what they've done in the past.
Thanks, Councillor McMaster. Through the mayor, the development of our program has always had within our clear sights the liquid waste management plan and any deviations from the plan which needed to be carefully considered, as they could add complex engagement or potentially, at worst, reduce community buy-in and support for the program. I know as it predates my experience here, and I think the CAO may have comments, but a few items jumped off the page as far as the community's needs to be met during the implementation of a wastewater treatment project. Of course, we want to be able to treat the effluent to the desired or the required levels, and all of these technologies do that. We wanted to make sure that the site, as well as the operations and the construction, reduced impact on residential communities, which of course the site still promotes that type of separation, and the technology doesn't impinge on odor in a way that would create a concern in that regard. The location of the outfall being one that didn't introduce new risks to the community, which we're remaining and maintaining the Cedar Street outfall as part of this technology, which would require that outfall to be managed essentially the same way as the oxidation ditch. Noise and nuisance and other areas that we want to make sure that we really deliver on as part of this project, regardless of technology. We've started a detailed vetting system as this technology and any changes would, if they would, or if they could be perceived to risk any of the elements of the liquid waste management plan. And so far, we don't believe that that's the case. And we've made sure that our conversations with the province has also included references back to the liquid waste management plan. So I agree that we want to have a good communications plan, and we want to make sure that the public has a chance to understand where this project is headed and how things have changed. And I take your comments that has to be done carefully and thoughtfully to make sure that we don't lose the support that this project has enjoyed in the past. And that is definitely within our sights. I'm not aware, as the sort of staff person on this project, of any reason why we would have concerns at this stage about being able to deliver to those needs. And we'll have to come up with the right project plans to make sure that we have communications with the community so that we can share this information and knowledge with the broader audience. I'll just pause there in case Bob would like to contribute, because he's been part, of course, of the process before me.
Yeah, just really quickly, I think that captures everything really, really well. Thanks for that, Mr. Work. There's a bit of, we have two processes that have been underway end to end for about 7 years now. We had a liquid waste management plan, and that's where we had a committee where we had some council members, some members of the community, and some technical advisors, and a site tour was done, and so on. The result, the liquid waste management plan that was developed, that Fraser referenced, identified some potential technologies, but didn't commit us to one, and committed us to looking further at them as the wastewater treatment plant was designed. So I'm confident that we're not offside with that work that we have done. And none of that is to say that we won't or shouldn't continue to consult with the community or provide communication with the community. But what I've learned about what is on the table here, this technology is very similar to some of the technologies with a bit of a twist, but some of the technologies that we were talking about through the liquid waste management plan. And so, I think we're good there. And there's the added benefit of the footprint that neighbors relatively nearby were concerned about is getting smaller rather than staying the same or larger. So I hope that we have the opportunity to communicate a really good news story in the coming weeks.
Thank you. Councillor Steer. And then Councillor Anderson, and noting the time for everybody.
Yeah, and thank you very much. And it's great news that significant cost savings from the review process on the IFAS system. And I will, of course, support endorsing the new treatment program, and equally positive about the constructive conversations with senior government funders. And I do look forward to hearing back from staff for consideration of the final costs, timelines, and hopefully positive feedback from the provincial authorities. And somewhat related to Councillor McMaster's, and I do thank Councillor McMaster. He's been on this for many years now. One of the questions that immediately came to mind was this technology, I know it's relatively new, was this technology in consideration in the previous, the very first iteration of the design review process when we were in consideration?
Thanks, Councillor Steer, through the mayor. You kind of got me on that one a little bit. When we look back at a lot of the reports through WSP, and I'll turn to Mrdt to see if she has any previous details that might support the answer. I'm not sure how much work had been done on assessing IFAS for this application in the sort of 2017 to 2019 timelines. There was several technologies that were assessed, and then the last two, or the final two, we assessed as well, which was the oxidation ditch and the sequencing batch reactor, which had different levels of cost and complexity, which privileged the oxidation ditch based on its overall simplicity of owning and operating and maintaining. I would suggest that the IFAS system, it's been around for a little while, but is becoming more prevalent as a standalone technology. To my understanding, it was historically used most frequently to expand existing systems that had activated sludge to get that concentration and that performance to expand its capacity. But I'll see if Mrdt is able to provide a little bit of reference, and then maybe she can shed light on what year, or maybe how that was assessed back in the day.
Thank you, Fraser. Councillor, to answer your question, at the time, Opus, Dayton and Knight did an analysis of several different technologies through the liquid waste management planning process. And as Fraser mentioned, they did look at several different technologies through the lens of seeking not only the technical requirements of the regulatory bodies, but also seeking the operational simplicity that the district was asking. And at that time, certain technologies stood out compared to the others, and IFAS was not one of the technologies that were looked at in great detail at that time. But through this process where we opened it up to looking at all different technologies that met not only the technological requirements, or sorry, the specific technology requirements in terms of meeting the regulatory requirements, we also wanted to make sure that we were meeting the constructability requirements that Fraser detailed in his presentation. If there are specific questions related to treatment technology, I would like to invite those questions. We do have a specialist on our team available to answer those specific questions.
Thank you, Ms. Herrera. Is that sufficient there, Councillor Steer, before we move on to Councillor Anderson, and we can entertain Ms. Herrera's request?
Well, as much as I love to talk about sludge, I think it's been well documented, and of the A through K potential technologies, I'm really comfortable with the presentation that's been brought forward so far. Thank you.
Excellent. Councillor Anderson.
Getting my mic on there. Yeah, I'm just curious of a couple things with the modular construction off-site. We don't anticipate any problems with transportation and highway closures, I hope.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. Through the mayor, I don't imagine there could ever be a challenge with respect to transportation there. Yeah, of course. The detailed design phase that we're about to embark upon is going to have to deep dive into the logistics. Of course, it's one thing to fabricate and get it ready on the Lower Mainland. It's another thing to get it here on the coast. I know the project team has been thinking about some of those things, maybe as early as 2020, about how to move to a prefabricated model and then how to transport the very large components here to Tofino. So that will be something that we dig into over the next couple of months to make sure that we have some options And if we're relying on the road and Kennedy Hill, then we'll of course require and demand a certain amount of refined and detailed project planning and timings.
Okay, and any impacts on the energy requirements? Are they reduced? I know that was one of the things that the previous design had some challenges.
Thanks, Councillor Anderson. Through the mayor, the energy requirements have been modeled in a preliminary basis using the different size and specification rotating equipment mainly, which drives up our energy costs, is pumping, fluid pumping and aeration so systems. The IFAS is better from an energy perspective than compared to MBR technology, and I believe it has a slightly elevated overall energy cost when compared to the oxidation ditch system. We are looking at how we can minimize that overall, because it is going to be one of the main cost drivers for operating costs. But again, it's sort of trying to balance the different degrees of freedom here when it comes to chemical use and costs, labor hours, maintenance, substances and supplies, energy, and staff levels of competencies and that kind of thing. So we're trying to balance all of those for the different systems, and IFAS came out in a good way on balance overall for the operating cost and simplicity, access to spare parts, that kind of thing. So we'll be looking at energy very closely as we step through the next series of design.
Okay, I have some other detailed ones, but I can ask those at another time. Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Just to clarify, Councillor Anderson, at another time, as in another meeting or a personal correspondence before we move on? Another time. Okay, the rest of council, anybody else have questions? Councillor Thick, noting the time. We have another presentation as well.
I am noting the time, but it's a very, very important issue that we're talking about too. And talking about time, I just want to get one thing off my chest, and that was it's very, very difficult actually to receive the information on Friday afternoon of a long weekend and to make some good decisions a few days later. So having said that, I want to just acknowledge that everyone else has put in a lot of time to get to this point too. So thank you, Fraser, and the team that's working with you. I had several questions, and I'm not an engineer or not a chemist, so I don't have all these answers. But one of the questions I had was, why wasn't the IFAS system, I think, proposed before now? And I can't remember if Councillor Steer said that, but I wasn't quite clear because I had read that it's been around for a long time. So I'm not sure. I haven't got it straight in my mind why we didn't have the IFAS system as a potential system before now. That's my first question.
Through the mayor, thanks, Councillor Thick. As I mentioned before with Councillor Steer's comments, I don't necessarily have all of the details about the full suite of equipment that was looked at, even at a preliminary basis by my predecessor in the team, many of which are no longer with either organizations that are currently involved. But like Ms. Rar said, the technologies that were looked at were assessed by engineers at Opus and the district staff as to their best potential and best fit for a set of requirements for the District of Tofino that was actually less robust in its architecture. So I'm not sure exactly why it wasn't assessed, but I felt it was very clearly my responsibility and the responsibility of the project team to go back at this pivot point in the overall program where we were met with the unaffordability of the previously promoted technology, which was oxidation ditch, and to make sure that we went back and scooped up every potential technology that offered a winning or an attractive solution for the District of Tofino. And especially, like I said, with this new set of requirements about reducing concrete, reducing time and human resources on site, reducing size and integration and these other drivers that we knew from the market responses really drove costs. So while I'm not able to answer your question directly about why wasn't it, the project team definitely felt that it was worth spending the time and the effort and the calories to go back and make sure that we had a much more comprehensive and documented system where even those that were preliminary assessed were captured in our records. So we've done that now. I think one key difference that we haven't talked about tonight is there was quite a bit of worry, as I understand it, in the previous project about our ability to attract higher than a level 2 treatment plant operator. Tofino has challenges with respect to technical specialist retention and attraction to our community. Of course, we have lots of things to overcome to get people here. But as we have seen in the last couple of years, many of even the more basic, finger quote, basic types of technologies continue to demand much more technological specification and competencies from staff based on laboratory requirements, sampling requirements, maintenance that's done in-house, that kind of thing. So when we re-looked at that, I softened our requirement to be at a level 2 operator because I didn't believe that was a true assessed or measured risk. And I had also seen us be able to attract and grow some of our expertise with respect to the water treatment space. And I also see EOCP qualifications growing in water, where we do have to deliver level 3 supports for our systems that are currently in place. So when I risk assessed the level operator that we needed, I allowed us to go up a level, and that introduced some new technologies that were now considered viable for us.
Thank you. And in your preamble, you mentioned that there are many places where IFAS is operating, and I just wondered from a council's perspective, where are those rural and remote places, and how are they managing in terms of operational costs, and just how long have they been running? And can you give us some background on other similar community situations that we could maybe feel confident in or identify with? Thank you.
Sure. Through the mayor, I'll first provide a bit of context, and then I'll maybe ask Ronan if he could help provide some content on this particular question. So as WSP and NAC have identified, these systems are currently in play in North America and in Canada, and including in major centers or rural communities. And conversations that we've had with the engineering team to gain the same level of confidence that council seeks, which is, are we being innovative here, or is this mature technology that we can rely on that has a robust track record? And that's, of course, what we all want. So we have been provided assurance from both WSP unanimously with NAC that the expertise, the track record, the experience, and the exposure exists with these communities. I have a list in front of me here that talks about the ones just from the one vendor supplier, which includes, I think, up to 20 in North America that are currently in service that are applied to both community and industrial sites. And I can ask Ronan if he might want to chime in, and then maybe I'll go to Lalith after that about just the confidence that we have in IFAS as a proven technology and a proven track record. Ronan, could you provide a bit of comments? And then I'll go to Lalith right after.
Yes, Fraser. The list I sent you did contain 16 plants in operation in North America. 2 of them were in operation in Canada, one in Quebec and one in Ontario. There were also other packages. There were other plants noted on that list, which included MBBR technology, which, in a certain respect, maybe Lilith might be able to touch on that a little better, is a similar type of process, but IFAS is well used, and as Fraser pointed out, just one vendor has been able to point out 16 plants that it is servicing in North America. During our technology review, there were responses from 2 other vendors as well. So, you know, there is quite a few examples of IFAS in operation in North America.
Thanks, Ronan. And if I could, Council, I'll ask Lalith to provide a little bit more about the confidence of the IFAS system for application here in Tofino and maybe some of the sources of that confidence?
Yeah, thank you, Fraser. The oxidation ditch technology, for example, is considered a biological treatment, and we are looking at all these technologies that we looked at actually are biological treatment technologies. That means we utilize the bacteria and the other microbiology to remove the organic and remove the ammonia, which are the kind of main constituents that we are looking at. So, but many of these technologies, including oxidation ditch and activator sludge, are called suspended growth. That means the bacteria and the microbiology grow in suspension in the liquid, but they're doing the same job. In the IFAS and MBBR technology, what we do, we provide inert media so the bacteria can actually grow as a biofilm in the media, in addition to be in the suspension. So that's why those group of technology we call attached growth. So both attached growth and the suspended growth biological treatment has been there for many, many decades. And there are various names, but they all utilize a very similar process and the technology, starting from the trickling filters, if you're familiar, that's one of the IFAS technology as well. And the MBBR is another one we call moving bed bioreactor. That means some plastic media is moving within the bioreactor. What it does is now, in addition to the suspended bacteria, the attached bacteria also helping. And that helps us a lot in many different ways. These attached growth bacteria, being a biofilm, they are more resilient. They can adapt to changes much better. And most importantly, we can maintain a higher concentration of bacteria, so the overall footprint will be lower. So what exactly happened is that oxidation ditch, where the bacteria are in suspension, now we make it much smaller, but we have the same amount of bacteria we can maintain thanks to that attached media. So this is not actually a new technology. This has been there for a longer time with different names. And initially, as Fraser mentioned, it was so easy. Now, if you want to expand the treatment plant, instead of adding additional concrete volume, I just add some plastic media, thereby I increase the bacteria concentration, and then I increase the capacity. So that's how the IFAS and the MBBR came up. And then later on, when you have a site-specific condition or the constraints, just like in Tofino, because of the constructability issues, then actually the installation of IFAS and the MBBR started as brand new plants. Having said that, I think Ronan mentioned that the MBBR and the IFAS technologies are slightly different. The construction is very similar in terms of the performance. When we are only looking for BOD removal, which is the organic removal, we call is MBBR. But if we add the ammonia removal, which is a requirement for Tofino because of the federal requirement of the unionized ammonia, then it becomes an IFAS. So basically, and then there are many plants. We have more than 4 major vendors in North America, and then many more in Europe. We have plants in many rural communities and up in the north in very cold climates as well. For example, in Hawkesbury, I think Ronan mentioned in Ontario, 13 million liters per day. And actually in Winnipeg, they're constructing a large plant, 125 MLDs, Manitoba South End plant, which is using the same technology. So I hope I didn't take too much time, but hope that answered the question.
Thanks, Lalith. Councillor Thick.
Yeah, just one last thing. I don't go into so much detail, but that leads into my last question, which the literature doesn't say very much about this, but I was concerned about these plastic bits. I don't know what you call them, but what about, is there any kind of plastic breakdown that might lead to some sort of microplastics now going into our system? And that question came about because I thought, well, I can't not ask this question. Are we introducing something else into our system or into our ocean that might be as harmful? So just a very brief answer to the plastic question is, I guess, what I was interested in.
Absolutely. Very sorry, Fraser.
Oh, please, Lalith, go on.
Yeah. Absolutely. We expect, theoretically, there could, any plastic that we use media in, many wastewater treatment facilities could theoretically, exclude these microplastics. However, these plastics are actually covered with the biofilm, the bacterial growth, so it reduces the chances, and they're actually not aggressively bumped into each other because of the aeration is much gentler compared to not hard. So in a sense, the amount of microplastic expected is very minimal actually. But we cannot say it won't be there at all.
Thanks, Lalith. And I'd just add to that, Councillor Thick, that the carriers, the plastic carriers, I know that there's different design options from different vendors about which ones might be fit for purpose for our applications. And as we go forward, we'll make sure that we assess the material composition as well as if there's other designs that might reduce that risk. But I think from Lalith's remarks, because there's no mechanical impacts or mechanical degradation of the plastics due to collisions within the tank, this is a very slow and kind of suspended process that's covered by the biofilms, that we would suggest that the risk of microplastics may be less than other conventional risks that currently exist today. So, but we'll assess that and quantify that in a bit more detail as we go forward.
Thank you. And Councillor McMaster, another question?
It was similar to one of Councillor Thick's questions. Can you name a standalone IFAS facility in Canada? The only one I could find was in Peel, Ontario. It was built in 2008. I'm becoming a Google expert in IFAS. And from what I've read, they're still having problems with it. And they also raised the point of a difficulty in getting spare parts. So any comments there?
Again, thanks, Councillor McMaster, for the question. Just to summarize, and I'll turn to Lalith again for some commentary about plants that are operating in Canada, any issues with respect to operational challenges as well as spare parts. We have talked a lot about this as a comparison of technologies in general, the access to specialists for maintenance and support, the proximity to specialists, whether they're on the coast or not, and how often we might require them. MBR provides a certain advantage with respect to remote support because of the instrumentation and controls that exist, but also adds all the complications that come with the heightened sort of electronic systems as required to support those processes. But I'll ask Lalith to maybe go back to that examples in Canada, confidence in the operational supportability, and then spare part.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Fraser. So compared to actuator sludge or the oxidation ditch, there are no other special or specific equipment, mechanical equipment associated with IFAS technology other than the addition of the media to provide that attached growth opportunity for bacteria. So with respect to the maintenance requirement and the operation, it's not complicated than any other biological treatment system that we expect. There's a Hawkesbury in Ontario, that's the 13 MLD plants is in operation for, I not recall exactly how many years. And there are 2 Saskatchewan province, 2 plants in operation as well. And this is particularly the IFAS, but if you add the MBBR, there are many. I myself has operated an MBBR facility in BC on the north. Yeah, I mean, I think Fraser mentioned, more than about 60 plants worldwide and more than 20 in North America, the IFAS facilities.
It might give council some confidence, if I may, that when there was the engineering team that supported this assessment and this review is not all here tonight. There was several other professionals from both WSP as well as NAC that were on the call, which I think between all of them would have well over 100 wastewater treatment plants built under their belts over their professional careers thus far. When we went through the pros and cons of the different technologies and we assessed the different things like whether it was capital cost or operational costs, supportability, access to spare parts, maintenance, labor hours, energy, all that kind of thing, the recommendation for IFAS above MBR and the recommendation of MBR and IFAS above all else were largely unanimous decisions across engineering and professionals from both agencies. So there is a high level of confidence that this technology is fit for purpose and affordable for the District of Tofino. And like Lily said, I would just want to highlight that while IFAS may be a newer term, the essence of the technology is tried and true through these suspended activated sludge configurations with just the addition of the media or the plastic pucks that are carrying the biofilm and interacting to accelerate and increase the concentration of the breakdown process. So hopefully that provides a little bit more for council.
Thank you, Mr. Work. With any further questions from council before we move to the recommendation? Seeing none, may I have somebody move the recommendation? Go ahead, Councillor Chalmers.
I'll move that the wastewater treatment plant program update report dated October 12, 2021 be received for information, and that the proposed integrated fixed film sludge wastewater process for further design development of the District of Tofino wastewater treatment program be endorsed.
Seconded by Councillor Thick. Any further comments? All in favor, please raise your hands. And there are none opposed. Motion is carried. Thank you very much, everybody, for the presentation and all the work on this. We have now Fire and Life Safety Bylaw number 1311-2021. Chief Baker.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight about something that's very important to me and I think many others as well. So this is a new fire and life safety bylaw. I'll just take one moment here and share my screen. Okay, there we go. So fire and life safety bylaw. And so Tofino's fire and life safety bylaw. This bylaw outlines the command structure for Tofino Volunteer Fire Department. It reviews the authority and enforcement of life safety issues. It defines the level of service provided to our community, and it updates Schedule A, which is the member honorarium and expense reimbursement. The current bylaw that covers very similar items is the Tofino Volunteer Fire Department bylaw 964, and that's from 2004. So why are we updating now? Our current bylaw, as I mentioned, is 2004. It represents a structure and service level that has evolved over 17 years. Positions have been added within the fire department. There's an increased emphasis is needed for fire safety inspections, entering people's property, and the authority to enforce. Honorariums and expenses have become out of date. So what I've done here, I just got a chart over the next couple of slides that will highlight some of the changes so that it's out there for everybody to see. So 2004 on the left, 2021, which is the proposed bylaw on the right. Starting with the command structure, our current bylaw references the fire chief, deputy chief, captains, and members. Over the last several years, actually since the time that I've been on the department, lieutenants have been added to manage the span of control, and we're looking to add that into the wording of the bylaw itself. A fire chief appointed by council annually. Both the fire chief and the deputy chief are now paid positions with the District of Tofino. Maximum number of volunteer firefighters in the 2004 bylaw is 25. Currently, we have no maximum, and it's based on space and the needs and service level for our community. Today, we have 30 members, which includes 8 recent recruits. The chief honorarium was listed at $5,000 with the deputy chief honorarium at $2,500. And in 2021, with paid chief and deputy chief, honorariums are no longer paid for the scheduled work week. In 2004, the bylaw stated that there was $12 paid per member for each call or practice attended. As long as I've been with the department, it's been $15 for practices and fire calls, and we're proposing that this increase to $20 per call or practice. Important to highlight here that this is for attending. This is not per hour as most departments would do. This is just $20 for showing up. In 2004, it was $50 per day for any member requested to assist the fire commissioner or the local assistant to the fire commissioner with an investigation. We're proposing today that this be increased to $150 per day. In 2004, there was no compensation for on-call weekends. Today, we are still in this position, and we're suggesting that $450 each is proposed honorarium for a scheduled on-call weekend for one officer of any rank and one engineer. This would begin at 6 p.m. on Friday evening and conclude at 8 a.m. on Monday morning for all weekends between June 1st and September 15th, and all holiday weekends in a calendar year. So for 2022, this works out to be about 21 weekends out of the year. So I'd just like to break down what that on-call weekend looks like a little bit more. Officers are required to be on call 7 weekends per year on a rotational basis, during which time you are 100% committed to the community and ready to respond immediately. Friday is 6 hours of on-call, Saturday 24 hours, Sunday 24 hours, and Monday from midnight till 8 a.m. is an additional 8 hours. This works out to a total of 62 hours for the weekend, and at $450 proposed honorarium, this is $7.26 per hour. Again, a reminder that these would be honorariums. There is not a paid hourly rate once they are called out. This is just an honorarium for the weekend. What this is the equivalent to for those hours of commitment is 11.5 weeks of overtime or on-call time based on a 37.5-hour work week. So I felt it was important to just explain what that breakdown is so that Mayor and Council can have a better understanding of that, as well as those that may be following along tonight and looking at how their future tax dollars may be spent if this bylaw is adopted. Our recommendation is that the District of Tofino Fire and Life Safety Bylaw number 1133, 2021 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time. And at this point, I am happy to take any questions, and I will stop sharing my screen so that I can see everybody.
Thank you very much, Chief Baker. Councillor Anderson, I do have a couple questions. Councillor Steer, Councillor Anderson first, then Councillor Steer.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how the honorarium plays out on long weekends.
Well, typically when we do have a long weekend, unfortunately, the person who draws the short straw on that weekend, they pick up an extra day. So that would just fall into the same sort of pattern. The weekend is considered the weekend, even if it has an additional day on.
Is that,
thanks. I guess the other question was the $450 is per member of the two, right?
Yes, so it would be for $450 for an officer and $450 for an engineer. The thought behind this is so that no matter what, we have somebody capable of making critical decisions and somebody capable of operating the mechanisms to provide water for fire protection. We do have many other members, but with people's changing work schedules, so many of our members being business owners, and just the strain that COVID has put on everybody's business, it's getting harder and harder to guarantee that people are available and for business owners to turn down opportunities to work, and more firefighters that are just told they're not able to have the time off. So by providing a paid honorarium, it allows them to make that decision to give their weekend up to the community, as opposed to and still be able to earn a living, as opposed to having to pick one or the other and volunteer for free when they do really still need to make some money to earn a living.
Thank you, Chief.
No.
Councillor Steer, go ahead.
Thank you, Chief Baker, and obviously very overdue for this revision. And frankly, I believe that our community is getting a bargain for the level of service that Tofino Volunteer Fire Department delivers. And just on that note, just for clarity around the financial implications, as you pointed out to the taxpayer, and I thank you very much for that. Do you have a rough estimate of I know some of those are impossible to do, to calculate, but do you have a rough estimate about what that yearly total might look like?
Based on an average of, we'll say, for instance, 2022 was 21 weekends that fell into that category of June 1st to September 15th and the additional holidays outside that. So that was, I think, 21 weekends. And just the quick math on that, put it around $19,000.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Chalmers.
Thank you. Councillor Steer pretty much hit all my points, but I just do want to reiterate that I also support it. I think I've seen how hard it is, the on-call and many fire volunteers throughout the years, and it's definitely well-deserved, especially with the amount of increased calls that have been happening, and I'm assuming will continue to increase. Same question I had from Councillor Steer about the estimate, and then just a quick question maybe to staff. Procedurally, we are about to go into a budget meeting. Was this something that we would then pass and then it falls into the budget, or is it kind of separated as it's coming to council as a bylaw?
Yes. So I did meet with the finance department prior to putting this bylaw together and we felt that because the honorariums and the reimbursements were part of the bylaw, we did need to introduce the bylaw first and acknowledge that it would have some budget implications. So I think timing wise, we're not really looking to try and implement this prior to 2022. So definitely need to discuss timing of the possible adoption of this bylaw closer towards the end of the year. But something that the CAO and myself and the finance department will absolutely be talking through should we get past this stage this evening.
Excellent. Do we have Councillor McMaster? You've got your hand up.
Yeah, I'm fully in support of this. My question is, if we respond to an accident, like a road accident or something, I mean, do we get anything from ICBC?
It's an excellent question. We are eligible for money through Emergency Management BC if we provide services at a motor vehicle incident, if there is extrication required. So if we, for those that may not know what that term means, if we have to cut somebody out of a vehicle and use the special tools and that sort of thing, then we are eligible for some reimbursement. Doesn't always happen. It's fairly rare that we've actually had to do that over the last several years. We're always prepared for it, but those are the conditions that reimbursement happens in that regard.
Hey, thanks for that.
I have a couple comments, Chief Baker. Actually, two comments that I did speak with our CAO about today. One is that actually both of them have to do with the powers of fire chief, which are changed from the 2004 bylaw. And one I think I've answered, but I'm going to bring it up here, and it's that the removal of the clause subject to ratification by council, and that has to do with the make and enforce rules for the proper and efficient administration and operation of Tofino Volunteer Fire Department. Change and replace those rules. Now, I understand that subject to ratification by council hasn't really been happening, and that that isn't needed anymore, and that's why it was removed. But I'll get you to comment on that before I move on to my other question.
Sure. Looking over that, I think it's my belief and understanding that portion of the bylaw back in 2004 made complete sense when you had a volunteer fire chief. The potential was there that the chief may change year after year. It states right in there that the chief was appointed annually by council. And I think that type of oversight completely makes sense for consistency and that type of thing. I think it's changed over the years. The model has changed, although the bylaw hasn't, where the individuals in the role of being the fire chief, even while it was still a volunteer, they were on for a considerable number of years. So the consistency was there, and perhaps that oversight may have relaxed a little bit. I think in the last 7 years, while we've had a paid position, this department is, from my perspective, is managed in the same way that any other department would be managed, with oversight through the CAO, with reporting to council for both finance and updates on an annual basis. However, the inner workings, the day-to-day workings are left to the department head, which at the moment is me, similar to Director of Engineering and Public Works or the Finance Department. That's my perspective at this time, and that's how I see that plays out.
Yeah, I'm pleased with that, and just want to let you know too. Overall, I'm very pleased with this bylaw. However, there is one note, and that has to do with the increasing powers of the fire chief that I do have a problem with, and that's and I think this is under E, require an owner or occupier to undertake any actions the fire chief considers necessary for the purpose of removing or reducing anything or condition the fire chief considers is a fire hazard or increases the danger of fire. Now, from my perspective, that is very, very broad language. And so can you speak to that? And I'm just going to preamble that with, I would prefer to see this reworded to have some connection or basis or thread back to some fire standards or something like that. I do not like to see this kind of wide-ranging vague language. But can you just comment on that?
Certainly. The authorities that are laid out here actually come through the province and the Fire Services Act. So the fire chief, and in my case, in most cases with fire departments, the fire chief acts as the local assistant to the fire commissioner. It used to be that automatically by being hired into that role, you automatically qualified as that local assistant to the fire commissioner. Nowadays, you go through training, you are in a course, you're certified, and you do receive an official identification badge from the province stating that you have that authority as a local assistant. And the Fire Services Act is quite clear the way it lays out the authorities and the powers of those individuals. So the wording that we have in here and the authorities do come through that Fire Services Act. And Section 24 of the Fire Service Act actually speaks to the power of the local assistant to the fire chief. And there is a process, just like anything else. The orders is simply the term that's used at the provincial level, just like with building inspections and do not occupy orders, stop work orders, those sorts of things. And there is a provincial process to go through, as well as a process at the municipal level to review those or dispute those as well too. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question. It's not really any sort of change in the authority. It's just written slightly differently, but that is where that does come from.
Right. I just want to go back. I hear you on the Fire Services Act, but this particular bylaw states specifically the powers of the fire chief in 7 that these powers and the one I mentioned fall under the addition to those powers granted under the Fire Services Act. And that's what actually brought up my concern. So that's explicitly stated as in addition to the Fire Services Act, and thus the vague language or the broad-reaching language of any actions, anything or condition would concern me. I mean, just to be clear, I'm not worried about you, Chief Baker, doing something, but I think that in this case, it is a bylaw and the language should be specific. So you, just maybe go comment on that, that these are in addition to the Fire Services Act.
Yeah, I think it's actually worded in this, and I used the support from another municipality in the wording for the bylaw. It does say in addition, those items that are listed under there all do come from various areas of the Fire Services Act. It also goes to lay out in the Fire Services Act that any steps taken by a local assistant or an inspector cannot exceed any of those actions that are allowable under the Fire Services Act as well too. So there's that level of governance for sure, that we can't go over and above any of the provincial rules. and this is all in regards to carrying out the inspections and working within a fire scene for investigations and those sorts of things is what that's talking about. And it's also important to acknowledge as well that these are referencing businesses, hotels, gathering places. They're not talking about people's personal property. We don't provide fire inspections to personal property unless we're invited and asked to provide that service. So this is about businesses and protecting the safety to them and their and the people that that come to those businesses. So.
Just to carry on, is that language that this is restricted to businesses in this bylaw?
It's laid out in the Fire Services Act, and there's the expectation of the municipality to provide fire inspections to, I'd have to find it right here, to businesses, hotels, resorts, and public buildings as defined by the Fire Services Act. So that is in the section of inspection of buildings, which is section 9 of the bylaw, that makes reference to that part of the Fire Services Act.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Councillor Chalmers, just to finish off here, you know what, I hear your answers. They don't really, to me, it doesn't actually answer my concerns fully and completely. So I'm going to move on to Councillor Chalmers for a comment. And I'm sorry, Miss Best, you've got your hand up. You're muted for some reason. I can see you're not muted. There you go. You're still muted. Still muted.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
I must have hit this. Thank you. Thank you, Mrdt. I just wanted to provide information that Chief Baker consulted with myself on this bylaw, and Section 21 and Section 22 of the Fire Services Act actually has specific language that was borrowed and placed in this bylaw about inspection and order to remedy conditions. So that this language really is in the Fire Services Act. So I would hope that the same language borrowed through about allowing the where Section 24 states a local assistant may, in the municipality or part of British Columbia for which he or she is a local assistant, exercise the powers conferred by Section 21 and 22 of the Fire Services Act. And if you have your keyboards open quickly or you have a device available, Section 21 and 22 is inspection of fire hazards and order to remedy conditions, which is specifically item E on this bylaw.
Okay. All right. Well, then, if that's the case, I'll relent. It was very hard for me to find the connection there. Councillor Chalmers, then Councillor McMaster.
I was just going to say that I am happy with it as is, and if you are going to be stuck on it, if maybe we would just see how the rest of council felt and move forward for a vote. But if you're relenting, then I am happy to make the motion if nobody else has anything else.
Councillor McMaster.
I was just going to move the recommendation myself, so I'll do it. That the District of Tofino Fire and Life Safety Bylaw number 1133/2021 be introduced and read a first, second, and third time.
Seconded by Councillor Thick. And any further comments? All in favor? And seeing none opposed, motion's carried.
Thank you.
And moving back on to getting back onto track here. Business initiated by council members. We have a verbal report from Councillor McMaster.
Okay, I'll keep this brief. I attended the Board of Trustees meeting of VIRL on September the 25th, The board adopted a balanced budget of around $31 million for 2022. Municipal and regional levies will contribute around 25 million. So the library budget is an average increase of 3.84% over 2021. The board also approved a one-year hiatus on all new capital projects for 2022. So the total budget decreased from 39 million in 2021. The budget was supported by everyone in attendance. A small win for Tofino is, I've been asking for that we need a bigger library. After some research and badgering, they've said they're prepared to consider an extra 300 square feet. I still don't think this is enough. I'm going to take it as a small win, but I'm still going to continue asking for more because they're not recognizing the First Nation communities that we are servicing, and in their plans, they continue to say how they service all the First Nations. And I say, well, that's fine, but you're not recognizing them, just like Canada has not recognized them for the past 150 years. So I'll continue on that avenue, but let's accept a small win at the moment. That's all for now.
Thank you, Councillor Steer.
Yeah, sorry, I know in the sake of time, but Councillor McMaster, in the report, and I did see, I did read the report, and I was curious, there were potential design, when we had talked about design implications, is there more the ability to have a custom facility as opposed to the prefab options that were presented?
I'm hoping to pursue a custom facility. I know VRL wants to go with the prototype models or modular designs. I've been telling them that we are giving them prime real estate in Tofino. And as much as library users are probably more concerned as to what is inside the library, the community is probably more concerned about what the actual library looks like. As you know, there's been a new director appointed, and he's supposed to be on a tour of all the VIRL libraries. And I've asked that when he comes to Tofino, he comes to talk to council or the CAO or whoever, and so we can get this across. But it's going to take a lot of work to deviate from the prototype model. I know that.
Councillor Thick.
Yeah, and further to that, is there any appetite, Councillor McMaster, for some sort of a library foundation to be started here in our community so that we could potentially raise money for something that we really want to see happen rather than what they might give us? Thank you.
I would love to see that, and for some reason, which I cannot fathom, it's the first organisation that I've ever dealt with that is not prepared to accept money from another source, even though they keep on saying that their funds are repeatedly reduced by the provincial government. And for capital projects, they don't want to accept money from other sources. I'm going to continue on that because I think it's really stupid if someone's offering free money. But so, yes, I would like to see a Friends of Tofino Library started and to do some fundraising, because whether we use it for the exterior of the library or not, certainly it will be used somewhere.
Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, just in response to Councillor Thick's question as well, when I was the representative for libraries for Tofino, I think if we dig a little deeper, there is some room for maybe not a foundation, but at least they've made room for charitable donations of some sort. So I think it's sort of a question that we need to put to our community, that if we want to start one, I don't think it's impossible to contribute to the library. So I know there was provisions made at one time, unless they've taken them away.
My feeling is they welcome funds for the interior, the construction of the actual building. But as I say, I'll continue to work on that because it seems stupid to me.
Councillor Thick.
And further to that, just that our MLA, who is now the minister in charge of libraries, I think we could do some campaigning on this regard, because I think, you know, how can a ministry oversee libraries but actually put no money towards it? That's what I've come to learn. So perhaps what you're saying, Councillor Anderson and Councillor McMaster, I think maybe we've got a few avenues that we can go forward on. Thank you.
I wouldn't hold your breath on that one. Talking to the MLA just recently, I think if we are going to get a better library, we are going to have to get the First Nations on our side. So I would like to see this topic put on the next council to council agenda.
I think that's duly noted by staff. Hopefully, we can get on that. I do notice I'm in Cumberland, and they have a fairly modern, large library for such a small little town. So I wonder how they got it. Interesting. Thanks for your work on that, Councillor McMaster. Any further comments? All right, then we are moving on. No unfinished business. Question period. Do we have anybody signed up for question period, Ms. Best?
Thank you, Mrdt. There are no attendees at the meeting anymore, so no.
All right, then I will recommend that to move into closed session, that the meeting be closed to the public pursuant to sections 91 of the Community Charter to discuss matters related to A, personal information about an individual who holds or is being considered for a position as an officer, employer, agent, C, employee relations, K, negotiations and related discussions respecting the proposed provision of a municipal service that are at their preliminary stages, and that, in the view of council, could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality if they were held in public. Seconded by Councillor Chalmers. All in favor?